remembered for. But as well as great feet and a lot of pace, you're right, his kicks are in play they're priceless. They're absolutely priceless. And that one, I think then you started to believe a little bit that actually things are going your way on the day, and to score off the back of it as well. Willie Army was good again on the day as well. But yeah, you start to think, okay, 20 points to 6, they're going to need to do something quite special. But, again, you look at that Wigan League game earlier in the season that we had where we were over 20 points to the good and still lost. And so we've still got that in our locker, even sort of 60, 65 minutes with a good advantage. We've still got that ability to capitulate.
Well, I mean, it did start to feel then the errors started creeping in. Obviously, there was Drinkwater missing the pick-up and the ball landing nicely for George King to get his try, and it became 20 points to 12. Then the last 20 minutes just was absorbed by for the Catalan side, so all of a sudden started to make errors and started to give penalties away again. You must have been getting twitchy at that stage.
Yeah, definitely. It was the ball just kept sort of popping off people, didn't it, and popping forward. And everyone seemed to be have a case of the dropsies. It seemed to be both sides. But you just felt that at some point a Charnley or someone was going to get hold of the ball and make some meters, but it never actually it never materialised, thankfully.
They never quite made that last play at the end of it move. What about when the ball went out to Ben Westwood and hit him smack on the chest instead of smack in the hands? I mean, you must have been punching the air at that stage and feeling like maybe we're going to click on.
It's moments like that make you think it's your day, isn't it? And I'd been disappointed not to catch that one, to be fair. But and any other day he catches that and he goes through. And then any other days, a couple of the breaks where Ratchford got, he just got took at the last sort of minute. Not quite an angle tap, but it was close, wasn't it? A couple of times. And that little left edge, they seem to pick on Yaha and really go after him. But I think the Drinkwater one, because he's been so perfect. No, he's not quite been but he's so good,
instrumental.
When he made a mistake, and the others kind of looked round as if to say, "Wow, if JD can make a mistake, then suddenly they all seem to have that element of nervousness." And I think, I don't know. I mean, you could look and say, is his contract situation, did it play on his mind? Because I think that was probably his worst game for us.
He didn't seem to have as much control on things. Even throughout the game, it felt like Gigo was probably taking a lot of first receiver on the last tackle and that sort of thing, didn't he? So that played into Gigo's hands for the Lance Todd Award, certainly. The forwards got really, really tired, didn't they, towards the back end of the game? There was they were all rotating quite a lot. Was there any of the forwards that you think you were particularly scared of letting you down in that last 10-15 minutes, and were there any that you thought really stood up and drove you towards that win?
I'd have been more fearful if Elmer and Ferriol had come on, because they're like fighting and penalty machines. And I mean, to be fair, I thought Simon and Busquets, they tired, but for me, the one moment that I actually thought, we won this, was that fifth tackle kick into the centre under the sticks, and Casti rose imperiously and just plucked it out of the air and caught it. And you think, geez, that's technically not his job, is it? But it's just a perfect bit of play. And again, that after they'd kind of had the 40-20, then got tired, and then Warrington had got back in it a little bit. But that catch, I think, was probably the moment where the team started to believe, certainly. And he drove them forward, and he was amazing.
There was a couple of carries in that set as well. I think early on it looked like you weren't going to make meters, and then I think Simon had a big carry, and then Casti had a big carry himself, and it kind of cleared you up the field, gave McAlorum a bit of space to put in a nice kick, and it felt then like you'd got some senior leadership in that side that was taking control. So you must have been confident-ish after all of that, after Warrington bouncing off so many tackles but not making the last pass or not beating the last man. You must have been confident at that stage.
Still not until the whistle went. Because once they'd got back to that 6, you start to think, if they got a converted try now and it went to Golden Point, there's no, physically, mentally, there's no way that the Catalans would have been able to pick themselves pick themselves up, and even with Drinkwater and Gigo and McAlorum with kicking ability, you would have still backed them, I think, to have got it. So it was still like really knife edged for that last 10 minutes, and there was a couple of times, I think the Sam Moa one where he dropped it twice, didn't he, more or less in sort of consecutive sets, and you think, wow, if even he's starting to feel it. I think the weight of history, I know it's a real cliche, isn't it? But the weight of history suddenly started to come down. I think a few of them, with sort of 4 minutes to go, maybe realised what they were about or could have been about to achieve. And I think it wasn't like a normal cup final. I think if they get back again at some point, then I think they will manage the last 15, 20 minutes of the game a lot better than they did this time. I think they knew how close they were. I think they knew how important it was that they got over the line. I think they believed all the publicity about how good for the game it will be. And I think it just weighed on their mind that little bit. And I think that's when they realised how close they were, that's when their performance started to revert back to sort of February, March Catalans.
So tell me about the sort of celebrations then once you managed to get through all that and that final whistle was blown. I'm sure it was like the most elated moment you've had in sport.
Yeah, I'm glad no one was looking at me, because I was leaping up and down. The wife had a couple of tears because of how, and it means a lot, because no one in Lincolnshire cares really. A couple of people at work on Friday had said to me, "Good luck," and but even where we play rugby, I think there's one guy who supports Rhinos and one supports Widnes, and the rest of people are just sort of curious bystanders. So there isn't the level of interest locally that maybe there is in Perpignan, for example. But that doesn't mean that you don't invest a lot of emotion, a fair bit of cash, and a fair bit of your time into it, and you feel it, and you believe it as much as they do. And I think Catalan's got a lot of stick early in the season, quite a lot from us. If you read our tweet timelines back, you'll see McNamara out quite regularly. We're now kind of doing it. It's an ironic. I'm not necessarily still sure that they play the right. They play the way that Catalan should play under him. For me, I still like that element of jeopardy and those length of the field tries, but then he's won trophies, hasn't he? So he can't risk beyond criticism this week. But yeah, it was just like, I think it was the longest shout and scream that I've ever let out, and sort of arms in the air, fists flailing, pumping and jumping up and down. And yeah, you don't take it all in, do you? It's kind of like sitting back and watching it on the iPlayer that you take a lot of the stuff in that you don't see on, like that moment. You're waiting for, but you're like desperate for them to get their hands on the cup. So yeah, and it was nice to see that there was a clip on watching it back on TV today that showed like McNamara in his box with about 5 or 6 minutes to go, and Greg Bird was in there with him, and he's like, he just got his face on the desk with his hands over his head. So that's pretty much how I felt.
Yeah, they were going through the rigour just like you were. Obviously, you weren't in France for the Cup arriving back in Perpignan, but we've seen some of the clips and that sort of stuff. What have you observed from those celebrations about what it's going to mean for the town, for the club, for the sport?
I think it's massive with the USAP, the union team, getting back into the top 14. I think it's a good time for Catalans to win something, because it's not the biggest city in the world. So to have two top flight rugby teams of different codes in the area, I think Catalans, when they were first starting out, USAP went and brought in Dan Carter. I don't feel that they coexist, but too well.
No, it's not felt like that way over the last 12 months either, has it?
No, God no. But now we're beyond having to play games at each other's grounds and stuff for redevelopment. So I think it was quite important that they did something, for that. Hopefully now the travelling fans that are going over for the weekends and the beach and stuff, that there's an extra incentive now. Their team are going there to try and take down the first French winners of the Challenge Cup. So I think from that point of view, it will be great. I think from like the game day experience there is mega anyway. So I think the atmosphere, the passion, I don't think that can go up a notch, but we'll see. Probably when there's me, my missus and my kids in the away end at Castleford this weekend, we'll see. But I think they'll do well from it. And they're getting Sam Tompkins, aren't they? So next year already, you would think that the next aim has got to be getting a bit closer to the grand final.
Yeah, I mean, it's all trending in the right direction after, what, 10 months ago, feeling like they'd just clung on by the fingernails, really, finishing fifth and winning the £1 million game. That your feelings at that on that day probably were of some sort of happiness and elation, but not the same level that actually winning a trophy must be like.
No, that was a million times worse. The nerves and stress for the £1 million game were a million times worse. Million times worse. It was a horrible day. And it's a horrible day that like starts early in the day, and you know it's on your mind. Like relegation is this. If you lose, you're upset, but it's a cup final, and you know what's the worst that's happened? You've got to a final. I look back, you know, again, and the BBC were desperate to put that York game on, weren't they? They were desperate. They could see a team from 2 leagues below knocking a big team out of the competition, and we were hopeless at that point, and just about got over the line with that one. There'll be people that say we were lucky with the draw because we got another League One club, didn't we, on the way through? But it just...
But you beat St Helens. Not many other teams have beaten St Helens, and no one's beaten them like you did.
Well, that's true, and that you know, whenever we beat St Helens, it's always done in a way that gives them the maximum amount of pain, doesn't it? The Scott Giroud conversion from the corner. And I remember going to Knowsley Road years ago when we were bottom and getting the wooden spoon, and it was their last season there, and somehow we won there. I think Clint Greenshield's got a hat-trick, and you know their fans were there for a party, and the 8 or 9 of us that were there supporting Catalans actually had a much better time. So the spam fritters tasted sweeter.
So what's the lasting sort of legacy now for this side, for the coach, for the team? Do you think it's going to create more for French Rugby League? Do you get any sense from the people you know over in Perpignan and that there's already a greater sense of, I don't know, awareness and interest in the game in the south of France, or in all of Catalonia, really? Because I hear Bernard Gauch is going to be taking the trophy down to a Barcelona football game and stuff like that. It's crazy.
Well, they got invited. They get invited every year to go to Barcelona. Every year, their social media has a feed of them on the pitch at the new camp, and they played at Montjuic, didn't they? The Olympic Stadium. Yeah. They played Warrington there a few years. So I think there is. It's the kind of area where there's always British people about you along that bit of coast, and I think that people are interested as a result. You know, if you're I don't know, some Spanish guy or some French guy on that bit of border who works in a hotel or a restaurant, and you suddenly keep getting invaded by people in sort of funny shirts with loads of sponsors on, you're naturally going to be intrigued, even if you don't go. And I think now, though, that intrigue will you know, there's something tangible to hang on it. And the fact that one of the L'Équipe performances of the week, you know, this week is Catalan Dragons is quite something, because L'Équipe have, you know, they're based in the north of France. They're particularly you know, union based. But seeing some of the tweets from sort of famous, you know, people in sport, you've got the Man City right back, I think he's French. He tweeted them. You know, you've got a whole host of Tour de France cyclists who are French who are kind of into it and tweeted, and so they've got to make the most of this, I suppose. And
everyone likes to get behind a winner, and now, you know, you can go down to the ground and you'll be able to see the trophy on display somewhere, and it just changes the whole. I think it does add an extra layer to that experience, and that experience for new people to come into and share in something. You know, it would have been a lot crapper last year sharing in a team that felt like they were going backwards compared to a team right now that are definitely on the up. So it's amazing.
It is, yeah, and why for the wider French, you know, league as well. There's a lot of good players in the French domestic competition, and you know, even if Toulouse don't get up via the £1 million game, or you know, get into Super League anytime soon, you've still got the domestic derby in the French league between the Dragons under 23s and Toulouse under 23s, and then there's, in that particular area, there's a lot of small to medium sized clubs who take on players that the Dragons or the Toulouse side don't necessarily keep, but it's also a way of promoting the game and getting the interest. And
of course, in the Catalan side was particularly the forward pack was very, very French influenced. But even young Michael Goudemond came off the bench, and this is his first year really at this level. So it gives people like that inspiration, that pathway to become an elite sport person in rugby league.
Well, he was outstanding last winter. There was kind of calls early in the season for him to get in. And but I suppose for every player like him, there's been a Lucas Albert who's